Guys, how are you all? I hope you all are fine and good. So today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was trained brutally by Dark Knight? Episode 1. Now consuming no more extra time, let's move on to the story.
俺が守ってやるってばよ。別にあんたに守ってもらわなくても結構。
Oh yeah, take a number. I was lightning before the thunder. Feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. Feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder.
Agaker, October 10, 11 p.m. It was raining, and on October 10th, despite the foul weather, everyone was at the festival celebrating the death of the Kyuubi and the Yondaime Hokage. It was a happy sight, parents passing candies to their children, games were being played. So many things were going on that a bald and blindfolded old man with a thick mustache and short beard was not noticed in the crowd. So many things were assaulting the old man's senses that would have been pleasant, were it not for the fact that he knew something was also wrong about this picture. Being blind for so long had given him the ability to pinpoint very subtle details around him, a useful trait, given the number of swords strapped to his back. Right now, under the mask of happiness and celebration, the old man heard the sounds of feet running around en masse. An angry mob was jazzing what appeared to be a little boy around the streets of the village known as Konoha, and as of this moment, the old man knew where he had to go now. Naruto had been running around town for the past few hours now. Being the target of so many attacks had made him an expert freerunner, and coupled with his inhuman stamina, he was practically uncatchable. The mob was starting to close in. As he looked behind him, he could notice the crowd was waving around a lot of weapons and torches, and it would seem that life really hated him at this point, because this time there were ninja in the mob, throwing kunai and shuriken at him. Thankfully, all these attacks have also trained his reflexes, and so he was able to dodge everything thrown at him in mid-step. It was here that he found himself turning into an alley. It was clear that life really hated him now, due to the fact that the alley ran into a dead end. Once he turned, he only saw the futility of running. The mob was closing in, and there was nowhere to go. It was here that he slowly started backing up out of fear, before he accidentally stepped on a can and fell on his back. And then, hell had begun as the crowd rushed on in, and began its onslaught, stomping on him. Some members of the crowd even went so far as to punch him in the face. He managed to muster up the strength through the pounding to let out an anguished, "What did I do?" Even through the beating, he could hear what they were saying very clearly. "What did you do? What did you do? You were born, you monster. I demon. This is for my mother, you bastard. We're not safe as long as that demon is still alive. Time to finish what the Yondaime started. Screw the Sandaime's law. Kill the demon brat now so that we have something to actually celebrate." And this was among the clearest sentences he could hear. Naruto tried to crawl away, but someone threw a sword at his left shoulder, severing the deltoid muscle and the humerus at the ball joint, followed by several kunai and shuriken penetrating his arms and legs to ensure he did not escape. The crowd moved out of the way for one the ninja among them to drag him out. The look of utter hatred in their eyes was clear as one of the ninja pulled the sword out slowly, causing him more pain, saying "To hell with my brother, I'm doing what's right for Tenten whether he likes it or not," before he cut off Naruto's left arm. Another ninja then held a kunai against his throat. "This is more than you deserve for killing my girlfriend, you monster." Upon finishing that sentence, the ninja dug the kunai into the boy's neck to penetrate the jugular vein. He then watched with glee as the demon started bleeding to death due to openings in his jugular and subclavian arteries. The old man was horrified at what he sensed. True, the boy's body housed a demon within, but that did not mean that he was the demon incarnate. Before he could think any more on his anger at these ignorant people for killing and mutilating an innocent child, he felt something pulse from the body. No, it couldn't be, but then again, it was worth it just to see if what he was sensing was true. Naruto's mindscape. Deep within Naruto's mindscape, one would feel as if they were in a sewage system, given the darkness surrounding them, and the pipes crisscrossing the ceiling and the walls. That was what was going through Naruto's mind as he examined his surroundings. His exploration was cut short as he heard the sound of chuckling down the corridor of the sewer. He followed it to the L junction and turned left to find the source of the laughing. It was here that he turned and found himself looking at a dead end with a large cage to the left. Naruto looked at the doors of the cage, and found that they were held in place with a single slip of paper that said "seal" in kanji, and he heard the sound of breathing heavy in the air. "You kid, come closer," said the voice, the silky smooth texture of it compelling him to take one cautious step towards the cage. Closer. The second he took another step, this took him a few inches to the front of the cage. It was then that he noticed that it had become dead quiet. Before the sound of his screaming filled the air as a naked arm shot out from between the bars of the cage, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and pulling him off his feet and into the darkness, all in the span of about 2 seconds. The second he felt that the hand had let him go, Naruto felt himself fall flat on his stomach. As he started to let himself up, he noted that there was nothing around. All he saw was black, in all directions. He could see nothing but black as far as the eye can see. His adrenaline rush had not yet subsided after the arm pulled him into this darkness, and he could feel it spike even higher, as he heard laughter come out of nowhere. Out of fear, he could not help but let out a nervous hello. Once he calmed down a bit, he began to analyze his situation, and the person that was laughing. It was clear that the voice was female, and yet it had a silky texture to it, as if her voice and the voice he heard before were one and the same, the latter being of a lower pitch of course. As he thought back to the arm that grabbed him, he noted that it was thin and muscular, containing a large amount of hidden power, and yet it also looked dainty, almost as if it belonged to a. "I was wondering when you'd show up," said the voice, causing Naruto to look around and find the source of that scary, yet sultry voice, "although I was hoping you'd come and see me at a less troubling time than this, but it's good to see you all the same." The adrenaline pumping through his blood was running on overtime. He was utterly terrified of that voice, and yet he was also drawn to it even more, as he tried to find the person whose voice that belonged to. Before long, he felt and heard something tear his shirt off from behind, causing him to look around for the perpetrator. Next thing he knew, something ripped it out from in front, revealing his malnourished body. Now he was getting really scared. Once the adrenaline was at its peak, he saw a pair of arms wrap around him. One arm snaked from under his right armpit and grabbed his mouth. The other running the hand down his stomach and both pulling him backwards into something soft, squeezing against his upper back as it pressed him against something firm and hard, causing him to turn red enough to put tomatoes to shame. Yes, this was most definitely a woman, and a very strong one at that, especially given the voice that let out a throaty sound of pleasure, as he was gently pressed into the chest and stomach muscles of this woman, and apparently, judging by how smooth the surface was that he was touching. This was a very much naked woman if her large breasts were any indication. He was just plain terrified that a woman like this would even be here as her breath was brushing against his ear, terrifying, and yet hot at the same time. Please don't hurt me, he'll do anything, just don't hurt me. You need not worry about me, kid, I mean you no harm, she said after moving her mouth closer to his ear, letting the words riding on her breath overload his senses, as they grazed the surface. In fact, I think you need to get a well-deserved rest right about now, he'll explain everything later. But now we're here on your own terms. Before he could ask any more questions, Naruto felt as the woman began to caress him from behind, running her hand up and down his stomach, while the other one let go of his mouth to push his head gently, to see the face of the woman that was touching him. This was an image of beauty he would never forget. Her head was heart-shaped, and her face had high cheekbones, and her long hair was the color of fresh blood, and her savage-looking eyes were of a brighter shade of red. All thoughts were thrown out the window as he watched this feral beauty slowly lick the tears of terror off his whisker-shaped birthmarks. He never did understand why it always hurt more when he was slapped on the cheeks. Neither did he understand why it felt good when somebody stroked them. That weird wide-eyed girl seemed to like touching them, and for some reason, she seemed to know to be extra gentle with them. It was then that he started feeling the hand on his stomach wander downwards and struck him in his nether regions, while she moved quickly from licking his cheek to outright kissing him. Something about her, and the way she touched him, seemed to comfort him. The way she kissed made him feel safe. It made him feel sleepy. As he slept, the woman gazed upon his body. She was disgusted at the people of this village. Their beloved Yondaime Hokage had asked one thing of them, one thing. And what did they do? They spit on his sacrifice, and the sacrifice of his wife. Her last container. How dare they do this to him? Well, now that the boy was resting, she could now get a little taste of freedom to satisfy her craving for it, and while she's at it, she may as well get some vengeance. But now that the kid was dead, she had only one option to take control of his body and save his life. She never wanted to do it. As a matter of fact, she absolutely refused to do it. But all things considered, she may not have any other choice but to bring the curse upon him to ensure his survival, and to punish these ignorant humans. I hope you can forgive me for this later, kid, but there was no other choice. I refuse to let you die, my love, and I absolutely refuse to let those fools get away with what they did to you, and the second I have my freedom, your beloved Ai-san and I will be having words. Real world. The mob was celebrating. They had finally killed the demon brat. Now they could really celebrate. Now they could really say to themselves that the Yondaime's work was done. Even the ninja responsible for the brat's death could not help but smile, up until they felt something, and then they turned and saw something they never thought they'd see. The demon brat was getting back up even after all the things they did, and even stranger still. He moaned in pain after a few seconds of managing to stand back up. What made everyone almost empty their stomachs in disgust was the fact that the moans of pain had ended as the demon brat had sprouted a new arm from the stump. This arm was a solid and bloody red and humanoid with 5 fingers tipped with razor-sharp claws, but the redness soon started to expand all over the demon boy's body, as his eyes starting to glow red. To add to his fearsome appearance, Naruto also started growing fangs from his mouth, as his appearance made him look like a wild beast, as his whisker marks started to deepen in both color and intensity. He then looked at his hands as if inspecting something. What they heard coming from his mouth would haunt them for the rest of their lives, as instead of a boy's voice they were hearing, it was a woman's. Interesting. I feel so light in this body, as if I were a leaf on the wind, allowing those beneath me to watch how I soar. Before the boy could muse any further on his thoughts, he dodged a downward slash from the ninja swordsman, and used the momentum of spinning around to smash his fist in the occipital bone of his skull. Whether it was fortunate or unfortunate that the man's death was so quick and simple, the other ninja in the group didn't know, but what they did know was if that punch didn't kill him, then the floor would have splattered his skull like a rotten melon, given the momentum that getting hit in that area in the right time would have added. The remaining ninja were frightened by the turn of events. This was Higurashi Manton, a Jounin ninja that was known for his top-tier skills in Kenjutsu, and a brother of Higurashi Haiten, one of the demon lovers apparently. Their attentions were then turned to the demon boy as he picked up the katana that Manton tried to kill him with to inspect the blade. He then gave a few test swings with his right arm, and nodded in approval to the blade. The voice coming from the demon's mouth would have caused some bloody noses to the perverts in the group, were it not for the fact that the demon Brad owned that voice, and it didn't help the creepiness factor that there was a fanged grin on the boy's face as he looked at the crowd. Show me what y'all got. The rest of the ninjas shook off their fear, as their leader turned to face them. Steel yourselves, men. We outnumber the brat, I guarantee you. That demon dies, Tony. Before he could finish that sentence, the leading ninja felt a blade pierce his spine at section T6, and then penetrate his heart before his dying body was dragged down and back, and then kicked forward off the blade. At this point, the other ninja who were Chunin were very disturbed by the sight of the demon brat, slowly licking the blood sprayed on his lips, and readied themselves to kill the demon boy before he could attack again. Holding kunai at the ready to stab and slash as they charged into him, the fox demon's response was the blade turning a vile purple before he spun around, and brought the blade down from right to left mid-swing. During the attack, an image of a skull-like visage appeared before the ninja, before noticing the demon brat's disappearance. Once they started looking around, they found that their attention was caught by a whistle, and the demon brat was right behind the mob. The voice was teasing, talking down the Konoha ninja as if it were superior. If that's the best that Konoha can do to kill a so-called demon, then you're already doomed. As to the rest of you idiotic ninja that are still here, I won't bother persisting. I've already killed you. The rest of the Chunin heard that, and were angered by the words, and that was the last emotion they felt as they finally realized the truth in the demon's words the hard way. One by one, each ninja fell to the ground dead, apparently having been cut by an ultra-sharp blade as they all fell to the ground in 2 pieces. The crowd of civilians that was left behind was beyond scared now. This wasn't supposed to happen. The demon brat was supposed to die tonight. Not come back to life and get stronger. They needed to run before. What's the matter? Didn't one of you something about finishing what the Yondaime started? Well, here's your chance to actually finish the job. At this point, the crowd had started to lose its nerve and began to disperse until they were pushed into the alley by an unseen force after the demon brat shot a fist into the air. Nah, I don't think so. None of you morons are going anywhere until one of you kills me. What, you all thought that I won't know that y'd beat an innocent child to get to me? You're all a bunch of stupid hypocritical pussies, you know that. So was the first victim. That's enough now. The voice that spoke from behind was very firm and wizened. Oh, the demon knew who that voice belonged to. Stay out of this, old man. These people have been asking for it for a while now, and I'm pretty sure you have a general idea of what's happening. The old man behind her simply shrugged. I have a general idea of what's going on with the boy, and I know what you are exactly. For a demon queen such as yourself, you are very powerful, especially given your lineage. I'd rather you didn't refer to Daddy Dearest anywhere near me, old man, unless you want to see how much of him is in me. Anyway, those idiots have had it coming, and I intend to bring that punishment here and now for what they did to the boy. The old man knew of her lineage, and to be honest, he couldn't blame her. The demon Kazan, or the Juubi as he was known in these parts, was not exactly a friendly demon, nor was he the kind and gentle sort, and that his children all had resentment towards him. He also knew that this much violence would draw in more ninja by. It was then that GSD moved closer to whisper in the possessed boy's ear. I know that, but if you want to make sure the boy stays in the Hokage's good graces, I would recommend that you relinquish control of his body back to him now. He's on his way. Don't worry, I'll have words with him while you're out, but in the meantime, I would recommend you allow the boy's body to rest. I understand why you did what you did, but you and I both know what would happen if an untrained body were to have sustained activity without a limiter. It was then that the possessed boy realized the truth in the old man's words, and what needed to be done. Then he sighed. Fine, but you make sure that while I speak with the boy, you talk to that stupid old man about getting him out of here. And if you intend to train him, you'd better take damn good care of him. Are we clear? Those were the demon's last words before the boy's skin tone began to change back to normal, except for his left arm, which remained red and tipped in claws. Before long, the Hokage appeared with several Anbu ready. As he looked at the scene before him, he was sickened at the deaths of several ninja, and the fact that yet again, civilians took advantage of the fact that he was busiest at this time to abuse Naruto. His answer to the situation was clear. Hibi, take Naruto to the hospital and make sure that Dr. Hazama knows of what happened. The rest of you, take the rest of these civilians to Ibiki. The ninja all let out their words of affirmation, and disappeared to do their jobs. I suppose you are Suratobi Hiruzen. Hiruzen had heard, and looked behind to see a blindfolded old man in a dark cloak behind him. Who wants to know? They'd like to have words with you about the boy that your ninja just took to the hospital. Really? And who are you to ask? Let's just say that I'm an interested party in the boy's welfare. As he sensed the aura of the man before him, Hiruzen could see that he meant no harm whatsoever. He simply let out a sigh of relief. Very well then, we'll talk in my office. Suratobi Hiruzen's office, Hokage Tower, half an hour later. So, we're finally in my office, began Hiruzen as he sat down behind his desk. May I ask what you wanted to speak to me about in regards to young Naruto? I'd like to take the boy with me on my travels, began the blind old man, as he sat down in the chair across from Hiruzen. I figured it would do him some good to be out of this place for a while. The look of skepticism was every bit as clear on Hiruzen's face as it was in his voice. I appreciate the thought, sir, but I don't think it would be a good idea that the boy leave the village, mister. Ah, yes, I must apologize for my lack of manners. To be honest, it's been so long that I've been with other people that I've forgotten my name. I am known in some circles as GSD. But before we begin, I'd like for all eavesdroppers to leave the room. Hiruzen was surprised. For this old man to be able to sense his Anbu bodyguards, he must not be a small fish in this world. With that, the Hokage raised a hand and made a gesture to all the Anbu in hiding to leave, causing 4 of them to materialize out of nowhere and leave, making sure to place a privacy seal on the door on their way out. Very good, and you might want to let the gentleman outside the window in on this as well, as I have a feeling that this concerns him as well. Oh, he knew what he meant, but that didn't make him any less surprised. The man that GSD spoke of was very good at hiding after all. Hiruzen simply turned to the window with a sigh. Well, Jiraiya, you heard the man, come on in. Upon hearing this, the man called Jiraiya walked in from the window with a suspicious look on his face. Oh, he has heard that name before, and Hiruzen made sure to ask him about it later. GSD cleared his throat and settled back down. Now then, let us begin. I say that it would be a good idea that young Naruto leave on a journey with me to the outside world. From what I understand in my short time here in this village, the boy is not exactly loved, and I can sense your hesitance in this matter. Perhaps you can clarify to me as to why it is that you don't wish for the boy to leave. The boy belongs here, GSD, began Hiruzen, that is all there is to it. The blind man gave a slight smirk at that, as if he knew something. Oh, and I suppose it doesn't have to do with the fact that the boy carries the Kyuubi no Kitsune inside his body. Both the Hokage and the Sannin turned their heads to face GSD so fast, their necks almost broke from the force. Don't be so surprised. I've noticed he was different from the idiots that tried to kill him, something I was able to deduce from being blind and able to sense chakra networks. I was able to speak to her and make her put young Naruto to sleep before she did any more damage using his body. The looks on the two men's faces was of clear shock. It was already bad enough that a secret of Konoha was seen through by a blind man, but to know that the Kyuubi was a woman really took the cake. It was then that Hiruzen regained his composure and began to speak. Since you know, I don't think we can. I'm not a fool. I know the consequences of revealing the fact that the boy is a Jinchuriki, and am not aiming to do such a thing. But tell me, why make the boy's life an utter and unspeakable hell, by telling the villagers about the ceiling in the first place? Why keep him here when he could be doing so much better outside in the real world at the moment? He is after all, an ordinary boy, is he not? Jiraiya took offense to the blind man's last sentence, and barely held himself back at that jab. GSD simply smirked, before he continued. Judging from the reaction of your colleague, I'd say that the boy is far from ordinary then, but then again, this is an opportunity. You claim that young Naruto belongs here, but I've seen evidence tonight that says otherwise. If he is that important to you, then why have you not taken extra measures to protect him? Hiruzen was nearing the brim with guilt. He knew he should have taken extra measures. But all the same, it didn't help that he knew that GSD was right. If I did, then it would have been seen as an act of favoritism. I've tried to do everything I could for the boy, but I can't seem to do everything. The civilian council overrides all my decisions. As it is, if it weren't for some of the elders and the majority of the shinobi council, he would have died the day he was born. But the Sai, GSD knew that Hiruzen was an old man. True, even if that were the case, he should have done more to protect the boy. Nonetheless, he was adamant about his decision. Then allow me to take the boy with me on my travels. During that time, I will be training him myself in my art. You get to set the limitations, seeing how much he really means to you. The old Hokage still had his doubts, and was about to voice them when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Sensei, I think it would be good for the Gaki. If this man is who I think he is, then I think Naruto would be better off being out of the village for a while, at least until he has to participate in the academy. Even though the doubts were still there, Hiruzen could still hear the truth in his student's words. Had seen Naruto's situation, and considered to himself how many times had been asked who his parents were, how often he had to watch Naruto end up in the hospital covered in many scars, asking why the people did this to him, so many things he could have done for young Naruto, and did not follow through. His answer was clear now. You can take Naruto on your travels, but under one condition. He is to be returned to Konoha by the time he is 12 years of age to enroll in a ninja academy. It was his father's last wish that he be a ninja of Konoha. I may have failed in his request that he be seen as a hero, but I refuse to fail him again in that respect. GSD let out a light chuckle. Oh, he was liking this arrangement even more. So I would be teaching the son of the Yondaime Hokage. Then it would be all the more interesting to have him as a student, and before you ask any further, I had simply put 2 and 2 together from what I've learned so far. We have an accord. I would return him to Konoha stronger than ever by the time he is 12 years old. There is no need to guide me to the hospital. I can sense the boy's chakra from here. With that, GSD got up and turned to the door. When he was sure the older man was out of earshot, Hiruzen turned to his student. The question he had on his mind was clear in both his face and his eyes. Jiraiya sighed and turned to his former sensei. I've only heard rumors. I had doubts about their validity, but a small part of me has always believed in the possibility they may have been true. These rumors spoke of a blind old man walking around in the shinobi nations with a demonic arm. Nobody knows of his past, but what is known about him is that the man was practically a master swordsman, possibly even a grandmaster at the very least. Due to his old age, his skill, and his wise words, it is said that he taught his techniques to the original 7 swordsmen of the mist, and several sages in Kumo among other students in the world. They even say Mifune of Tetsu, no Kuni, learned a few tricks from him. There was nothing that even my spy network had been able to find out about that old man that has been confirmed outside of the rumors surrounding him, nor was it understood why he was constantly traveling. But they did get a name from a few bandits that barely survived an ill-fated attempt to rob him. They said that the old man told them to call him GSD. The look of bemusement was on Hiruzen's face as he looked back at the stack of paperwork he had been forced to work on. It was as if on Naruto's birthday, they were at their largest. Likely those were requests to have the demon Brad executed or exiled. Well, if they wanted Naruto gone, then they got their wish for now. And when he gets back, the villagers would think twice before trying to kill Naruto again. Speaking of whom, he also had to see Dr. Hazama about his favorite grandson figure. Afterwards, he had several things to do, such as talking to Higurashi Haiten about what his brother did and his fate. He could only imagine as to the look on young Tenten's face when she learns that her uncle died because he was being stupid. Konoha General Hospital, 8:13 a.m. Naruto had awakened to the color of white everywhere. Oh, he knew where he was. Had been to this place more times than he could count, and he could only hope that Hazama-sensei was the one treating him. As he sat up, he began to inspect his surroundings even more. He then had flashes of what had happened last night: blood, death, his arm turning red and demonic. Yes, that was all he remembered. He simply lifted his left arm up to rub his sinuses from the migraine, when he noticed that it had changed color, and that his hand was tipped in claws. Perhaps what he saw was not a vision after all. I won't make any noise now, said a voice near him, causing Naruto to yelp in surprise. It is rude to disturb people when they are sleeping. Once he found the owner of the voice, Naruto found himself looking at an old man with an X-shaped blindfold sitting in the chair next to his hospital bed. Sure enough, next to him was that weird girl from that clan with the wide eyes sitting next to the Ambuhibi that had always helped him out along with Tora. He then turned to the old man with a determined look to protect the two of them if he had to. As if sensing this, the old man continued. They're fine, they were asleep by the time I got here. But you, young man, are coming with me the second you get better. Why? Because I've just received express permission from the Hokage to take you with me on my travels as my student. Truth be told, I was there that night you were injured. I know what you did then was in self-defense, but you need to get stronger to control it. That's why I asked the Hokage to train you. Naruto had thought about it. There was no lie in the man's voice, no malice, no false sincerity, just the intent to help someone. As he continued to sit in the hospital bed, he also thought about Hibi, thought about Inu, the Ichirikas, and the old man. He even thought about the weird girl with the wide eyes that was always following him. These were people he was willing to defend. His answer was clear. They'll go. The old man simply grinned. Very well then, we leave as soon as you recover. But you must promise me that whatever I teach you, unless it is on a mission, never use what I teach you outside of self-defense, and to defend those precious to you. Am I understood? At Naruto's nod of acknowledgement, the old man reached out and tousled the boy on the head. Then rest up. You'll need all your strength. The gates of Konoha, 1 p.m. DSD sat by the gates in meditation as he awaited Naruto's arrival, contemplating on how to begin the young boy's training. There were different paths a slayer could take, but wondered which one Naruto would follow. Before long, he heard the steps of someone walking up to him. He knew from the chakra's signature who this was. Are you ready, boy? I'm ready to go, Dadabeo. Upon hearing the boy's spirit return, GSD stood back up and turned around. Then let's not waste any time. I have much to teach, and we've a very long road ahead. As the two of them walked out the gates of the village, neither Naruto nor GSD had noticed a pair of wide eyes watching from behind a building overlooking the gates, as one Hinata Hyuga cried a silent farewell for the young Uzumaki. Fanfiction. Net. Just in. Community. Forum. B. More. Naruto. The Dark Knight by KUROGANE7. The 9 Naruto rated. M. English. Adventure. Naruto U words. 211k plus. Favs. 1k plus. Follows. 877. Published. Jan 31, 2012 updated. August 28, 2014. 322 Chapter 2. Return. AN. Well, that was a surprise. When this story first came out, I got a lot of favorites and subscriptions a while after it was posted. Not too many reviews, I'm afraid. Several of you were kind enough to read and review, and give me your opinions on what I should be doing next in the story, and so as a compromise to the two of you and your suggestions, I'll try to combine both. But all the same, do read and review would you kindly. Outskirts of Konohagakure, 5 years later. The day was like any other in the village of Konohagakure. The streets were bustling with people buying things, and it seemed like a party was going on non-stop and for a good reason. Well, as good a reason to many of the ignorant people in this village, as the demon Brad had been taken away. For 5 years, the people had celebrated. They didn't care who took the little hellspawn with him, they just cared that he was gone, just like they wanted. They only hoped he killed the demon before he got back. Little did they know that their celebration would be for nothing. Standing at the gates of Konohagakure were 3 people. The Tetsu and Izumo simply sat bored out of their minds at the gates. They really didn't want to be here, but it was necessary that they did, because no matter how boring the work in border patrol was, it was still very important. I really wish there was something we can do around here, said Kitetsu. Anything's better than nothing. It's all the villagers' folk were so damn bored. At least Naruto made things fun around here. I know, it even joined that celebration were it not for the fact that everyone in it is such a complete idiot, said Izumo. What they did to him 5 years ago was pretty much their own damn fault. If he turned into a demon and killed those ninja in revenge for trying to kill him, I wouldn't have blamed him. I'd turn into one myself, knowing what he had to go through because of their stupidity and ignorance. Totally, but still, before he could finish his sentence, Kitetsu turned his attention to something down the road walking towards the gates. Oh, he recognized that old man from 5 years ago. He was that guy that took Naruto out on a training trip. But he was now accompanied by 2 children around the age of 12. One of them was apparently a boy that sported a zipped-up high-collared vest with a hood that covered his face, such that only his nose line was shown, a pair of baggy cargo shorts that went down to his calves, and a pair of plated greaves that went over his ninja sandals. He was carrying 4 weapons, 3 of which were definitely swords. On his back was a large sword and a tetsubo slung over his shoulder, and at his waist were a short sword and a katana. What made him stand out, however, was that a bulky metal cuff and armband with a chain attached to both was clamped over his left arm, which was red, and ended in 5 claw-tipped fingers. The other was a young girl around the boy's age dressed in orange and brown skin-tight clothing. Her brown hair was tied behind her head in a bun, her eyes were the color of coffee, and she had the body of a girl her age that trained and worked hard in the martial arts. The very slender body type for a beautiful little girl, with the potential to be even more beautiful if her cards were played right. The 2 guards stationed watched as the 3 of them walked closer. Kitetsu worked up his nerve before speaking. Can I help you, sir? Yes, began the old man. You can start by telling your Hokage that I'm here. He pretty much vouched for me 5 years in advance to make sure that Naruto gets back in one piece. The look of shock on Izumo's face was very clear as he looked at the boy in the hoodie. That's Naruto. I hardly even recognize him. 5 years can do that to you, began the boy, although to prove to you that I am who I say I am, Kitetsu, you owe Izumo 50 ryo for that time I pranked the Uchiha district and started a chase throughout the village, and don't think I've forgotten about you, Izumo. Because you still owe me at least that amount, because you bet me all the ramen I could eat if I could cause all that mayhem without being apprehended on that same day. The 2 men looked at the boy with surprise in their eyes. Only one person knew about that bet besides the 2 of them. The Uchiha district was rigged with traps in such a manner that all the male members in the district were caught in very gay positions. That's right, the Uchiha men, with the exception of Itachi, were accused of being gay as of that moment. Suffice to say, every Uchiha that was a victim of the prank chased Naruto around the village to no avail. The boy was too tricky for them, even if they did use their beloved Sharingan to help in capturing him. By the end of the day, none of the Uchiha men were able to catch him. It's good to finally see you again, Naruto. Likewise. Kitetsu then glanced at the girl, who was with Naruto and the old man. Oh, he had a sly grin on his face, and the perverted chuckle was enough to get the boy's attention. And I see you've got the very beginnings of young love there. Who is this little lady? The girl simply grinned confidently. The name's Mylan, a pleasure to meet you. Any friend of Narukun is a friend of mine. Izumo coughed into his hand. Much as he was into reuniting with Naruto and meeting his possible future girlfriend, there was still work to be done. The girlfriend is free to walk around the village after she and the old man speak with the Hokage, but under the Hokage's orders, one of us is supposed to escort you to the ninja academy, while the other gets the old man to the Hokage tower. The old man lifted his hand for a polite refusal. No need for that, I already know my way around this village, although you are free to accompany me. Will you be fine on your own, Naruto? It will be okay, Kitetsu and Izumo are trustworthy. Tsurutobi's office, Hokage tower, 1 hour later. Hiruzen had constantly found himself filling out form after form after form, and he was getting tired. Had much rather deal with Konohama's clumsy attempts at assassinating him, or even Asuma's rebellious attitude, than to deal with the enemy of every cage. Oh, how he wanted to just burn it all away and be done with it. In fact, as he looked at the stand holding his pipe on the right, he realized that he had just the thing to do just that. Oh, he grinned with glee at the thought that he could make it Lou Hokage-sama, said the secretary, disturbing the poor old man from his thoughts. As she slammed the door open, Izumo's here, and Hess brought an old man and a little girl with him. He said you had a meeting with him. The old Hokage stroked his beard for a moment upon hearing that, and then he remembered. Send them in. Lo and behold, in walked Izumo with GSD and a little girl in tow. Thank you, Izumo, you can return to your post now. Izumo bowed, as the little girl led GSD to a seat in front of Hiruzen. So GSD, how are things so far? Same as usual, Hokage-sama, although I suppose it could be better considering what today is. Yes, about Naruto. How did the training go? To be honest, I never expected for him to pick up on swordsmanship quite easily. Given enough time to train him, I may name him my successor, should I ever die. Although I suppose fate could have been kinder to the boy. The girl that was with GSD had a frown on her face as if she knew what the old swordsman was talking about. What happened? Meanwhile, at the ninja academy, Iruka looked at the class roster. He really wasn't looking forward to teaching this bunch. Yes, there were civilians seemed to take it seriously, and yes, at the very least, he had actual ninja kids to teach. But this year's batch of students had a very big problem that seemed to kill his mood. The majority of this year's batch of students was made up of fangirls, Uchiha fangirls. So many screaming little banshees cooing and wooing the last Uchiha, and it was really hurting his ears. Yeah, he really didn't like this batch much, especially with so many civilian parents convincing their daughters that the Uchiha were the clan to marry into, all because Sasuke was the last of them. To his credit, however, Sasuke seemed very disinterested in the fangirls. Oh, the injustice. Granted, Iruka had perverted dreams of having fangirls, but not to that extent, and on that note, he found he couldn't envy the boy. But still, his twin sister was more pleasant than this. He heaved a sigh as the noise was getting to intolerable levels. He definitely didn't want this on a new day for school. Mizuki seemed to take amusement from Iruka's plight, and knew what was coming next. The latter inhaled a deep breath from both his nose and mouth, and let it out as he performed that infamous, to all but Iruka, Daionakubi no Jutsu. All right, you little snots, shut up. Upon hearing this, the students had started to quiet down. Even the fangirls knew not to test his wrath. Good, now for roll call, Aburam Shino. Upon hearing his name, the said child raised his hand. Akimichi Choji. The list went on all the way down to the U section of the list. Uchiha Sasuke. Iruka looked around, and found the young boy glancing out the window. Oh, how he wanted to smash his head through that window, but alas, the council would revoke his teaching permit if he did. Uchiha Tsukiko. His response was a terse here as he continued to go down the list. Uzumaki Naruto. The sound of a door opening filled the air and interrupted Iruka, and the class turned their attentions to the source of the sound, as in walked Kitetsu with a kid. Sorry we're late, he said. The kid moved slower than I remember. Iruka palmed his face, and shook his head. Clearly not his day at all, that's okay, but is that Uzumaki Naruto? Yep, that's him. Iruka studied the young boy, and saw that he was wearing a vest, with weapons strapped to his back. Okay then, Kitetsu, you are free to go. The second he was given permission to leave, Kitetsu left the classroom, while the teacher turned to face his student. Naruto, why are you bringing weapons here? The boy turned to face him. I'm sorry, sensei, he said, the bemusement clear in his voice. I didn't know anything about not bringing weapons to class, and I've been training with them for a while now. In fact, I just got here today, so this is the first time I've ever heard of such a rule. The teacher had a look on his face that stated his understanding. Naruto has been out of town for 5 years, so has heard, and so it wasn't surprising that he never heard of such a rule. It was also likely that his teacher did in fact train him in the use of all those weapons he carried on his back. Well, just bring your weapons over and we'll put them away for you. Later on, he'll teach you how to seal them away, so that you don't have to worry about them being stolen. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement, and started walking down the stairs towards the teacher's desk, first unlatching the Tetsubo with a smooth octagonal shaft from the left sling, then the large sword from the right, next came the short sword at his lower back, and finally the katana at the left side of his waist. As they were all taken off his person and put on the teacher's desk, Iruka noted that each of his weapons was rather heavy, if the creaking of the table were any indication. Very good, now would you please take a seat next to Sasuke over there? The fangirls were not happy with the prospect that they were being hindered in their progress with seducing the last Uchiha by this newcomer, although the fact that they saw his arms seemed to diffuse a bit of their anger. Can you please tell me which row that Sasuke is in? Iruka was puzzled. He was sure he said over there, so why the question? Can you please remove your hood? The boy saw no problem with it, and removed his hood, revealing sun-kissed golden hair and spikes and cheeks with whisker marks on them. What shocked the two teachers was the fact that this kid was wearing a blindfold. Iruka was possibly hoping that what he was seeing was not true. Hokage's office, the Hokage Tower. Blind? Asked Hiruzen, the shock evident on his aged features. In 5 years, you have trained him blind. That is not so. I was teaching a new skill him at the time. Instead, he accidentally learned another technique and suddenly went blind, guessing that this was an exchange from the gods for this, perhaps to teach the boy humility. The thoughts at the implications that ran through Hiruzen's head were mind-boggling. One thought, however, was at the forefront. Naruto had the potential to be so powerful that he was blinded by the gods themselves. This thought was not a very easy topic to keep to himself, and he was very sure that one way or another, Danzo would be hearing of this, but on the other hand, the good side of the coin was that if Naruto was taught properly, he could be the child of prophecy that Jiraiya had spoken of. Perhaps he can be guided on the path to starting an era of peace. Yes, the opportunity was there. He could see it now. Ninja Academy. No wonder he asked, the boy was blind. Oh, this changes everything. Blind ninja would have to rely on their other senses in order to survive a career as ninja, but he was still missing out on the basics that he needed to know, given his lack of sight. As he thought more on it, Iruka knew what sort of tests would have to be administered to blind students, and it was not too much trouble to do an oral test. Very well then, give me your hand and I'll guide you to the row you're assigned to. Iruka grabbed the hand of the student, earning very amused looks from the Uchiha fangirls that this boy needed to be guided to his seat. Ha! If that's the case, then Sasuke wins hands down, no matter what this newcomer has to put on the table. Okay class, now that I have your attention, I'd like to welcome you all to the Ninja Academy. Now we're going to test you all on your capabilities in a moment. Those of you who know how to use jutsu, with me, everyone else goes with Mizuki. 10 minutes later. Alright class, this is pretty much a show and tell out here, began Iruka. The reason is for safety. We don't want anyone getting hurt while this proceeds, so if you have a jutsu that requires a partner, then I will be your partner. Other than that, you may use the training dummies out here to perform a jutsu as necessary. As he called out each name one by one, each student had performed a jutsu they each knew. Ino had asked Iruka to serve as a guinea pig for her family's renowned Shitenshin no jutsu, allowing her to make him do some very silly things that he had the horror of watching himself do. Suffice to say, he used Ino's body to tell her to stop. Next up was Choji showing the Baika no jutsu, causing him to puff up like a balloon, before using Nichiren Sensha to roll around the field several times. Shikamaru had opted to stay out of the matter. It was not a surprise, due to the fact that he has inherited the infamous laziness of his family. Hinata Hyuga was nervous at first, but performed superbly when she used her Jaiuken techniques to strike the strings of the current training dummy, to cause the straw to fall out. Kiba and Akamaru both performed Jujin Bunshin no jutsu, and waved at the crowd. Before long, it was Sasuke and Tsukiko's turn, and the both of them used King Kakyu no jutsu to incinerate the next training dummy to come up. As he went back to the stands, Sasuke had a very wide smirk on his face, while all his fangirls cheered as he watched the new kid walk up to the training ring. He had just performed his family's rite of passage. Nobody can top that, not even all the other clan children. At the same time, however, this Uzumaki kid seemed to be making the number of fangirls on his side dwindle, as they drooled at him, unzipping his vest down from the collar, revealing his chiseled abs and the rest of his face. It appeared that they were also drawn by the fact that he was blind. Seriously though, who can fight without the power of sight? As he looked on at the apparent newcomer, he had this assured look on his face. It was all show, he was sure of it. There was no way that Do could ever match his prowess, even if he were able to see. After being led to the training dummy, Naruto turned to the teacher. Iruka-sensei, can I please have one of my weapons back? The jutsu I'm about to show will require its use. Iruka had a look on his face as if debating whether or not to do so. Eventually, he gave in, grunting slightly as he handed the boy the only blunt weapon he had been carrying when he entered class. Alright then Naruto, but I'll only let you have your Tetsubo back for this. No worries, it'll do. The look of doubt on his face was clear to all but the boy that had said it. Knowing how much damage a blind person could do, even accidentally, Iruka motioned for the rest of the class to step back. To his surprise and shock, Naruto hefted the club in one hand, as if it were a regular solid oak baseball bat, before winding back with it in one hand, and swinging upward, causing the dummy to be uprooted from the ground. Naruto quickly recovered and swung back down on the dummy, causing it to spin in midair. The next thing that happened, the dummy fell back to the ground in 6 pieces. But that was not the disturbing part. The disturbing part was that the straw and bamboo dummy fell into 6 pieces, as if it were cut apart by the sharpest sword in the world. Once he was done, Naruto got back up and sighed. Aw man, all that training and I still can't cut it into more pieces than that. To Iruka, the sight was both very frightening and very impressive, as if it weren't enough that this boy was able to lift such a heavy weapon in one hand. He was also able to cut a training dummy into pieces with a blunt weapon in one swing, and it wasn't easy to do that, mind you. Those dummies were made of tightly packed straw, and the densest bamboo possible to simulate human flesh and bone. As a matter of fact, these dummies were the kind that Iron Country samurai used to test swords on when there was no execution planned. And to top it off, he said that he still cold cut it into more than 6 pieces. If Naruto could do that with an iron club, Iruka hated to imagine what would happen if it were an enemy ninja that got in range of his student senses. The only response from many of the other students was the jaws hitting the floor and eyes widening at such a feat. Several of them had very specific responses, however. Ino looked on at the sight, and had a thought this newcomer was both hot and interesting. Yes, it would seem that she has already found herself a bit of a consolation prize in the event that she found Sasuke to be an unattainable goal. Shikamaru had thoughts on how Naruto was able to manage such a task. Shino had no expression, but simply watched the newcomer carefully, as his insects told him to be wary around this boy. Hinata, however, had no response other than to faint with a nosebleed, after turning red from embarrassment and seeing her future lover practically shirtless. Yes, her Naruto was back, and better than ever. Tsukiko simply was awed by the sight that such a feat was possible in the first place, although her newfound lust for the boy didn't help matters any, when she immediately named herself the president of his fan club. Sasuke, however, simply glared daggers at Naruto after being one-upped by this blind newcomer that was able to manage this. But he held his rage in check. There'll be plenty of time to test out this dope in the future. Yes, this would be the perfect rival to practice fighting Itachi and prove his strength. And while Hess added, "I'll make that blind fool teach him that technique." Bamboo Grove, after school. Naruto sat around cross-legged. He was at peace, he was calm. Well, he would have been calmer were it not for the fact that he felt the murderous intent of every person looking at him. Oh, how he expected this, for the villagers to simply glare at him. According to what he heard, as long as he was attending the ninja academy, nobody could touch him, and if he graduated and became a ninja, then getting glared at would be the worst of his problems. That, and they were afraid of him due to his weapons. It was then that he sensed a very easily detected chakra signature walking towards him, easily detected and easily recognized. "Sasuke Uchiha," he said, correctly identifying the person walking towards him. Why am I not surprised? If Sasuke's face showed surprise, it certainly didn't show. He simply worked up his composure. Oh, he knew what he wanted to do, and he'll get what he wants. Fight me, dope. The blonde simply continued to sit in meditation. The crowd was now surrounding the two of them, taunting him, calling him a chicken for not accepting the last Uchiha's challenge. "I really doubt it's a good idea, Uchiha. You could get hurt." "Well, see about that. Now just get up and fight me, or are you too chicken to do so? I'm warning you, Uchiha, back off, or else he'll humiliate you in the worst way possible." Sasuke wasn't having any of it. He was going to get this dope to fight him, even if the civilian council was needed to make him do so. "Oh, come on, what's a blind kid like you going to do? He'll bet your training is nothing compared to the might of the Uchiha." That did it. Sasuke watched as his opponent let out a frustrated sigh before he pulled out his short sword and walked towards the bamboo, cutting off a stalk and peeling it clean of leaves. He then tossed the stalk towards his would-be opponent. "We decide this in one stroke," began Naruto, cutting and cleaning another stalk of bamboo. "This is to simulate if you had to come against me with a sword. If you win by dealing a lethal strike on me first, then he'll do whatever you want for the rest of the week. Hell, he'll even throw in ownership of my weapons and the whole deal. On the other hand, if I hit you first, then you have to treat me to all the ramen I can eat for the rest of the week. Am I clear?" He watched as the blind kid held the stalk in his red arm, but handed his other hand out to shake, and with one tug, that one shake sealed the deal. Good. A chance to prove to the dope that he is inferior to the Uchiha. Sasuke held the stalk overhead in preparation for a heavy strike. Naruto, on the other hand, held his stalk in one hand behind him, waiting. The crowd was ecstatic. There was no way that the demon brat would win against the Uchiha elite, and before long, hell know his place as their punching bag. Heijaku, on the other hand, was watching the match in fascination. The supposed demon brat was teaching the Uchiha a lesson in swordsmanship. Oh, this was going to be very interesting. It was then that the duel began when Sasuke let out a battle cry and charged in with his bamboo stick at the ready to cut down his opponent. Just when he reached his opponent, Sasuke brought the stalk down upon Naruto's shoulder. Naruto brought his stalk up to strike the Uchiha from under the armpit. The impact of both hits had come at the same exact moment. For the crowd, it looked like a tie, but Jeku was no fool in the art of swordsmanship. He knew that this was no tie. He knew who the winner was, and it was very obvious that the winner also understood as to why. Sasuke grinned. He had finally shown this blind upstart his place. "Looks like a draw, dope. You're not as good with swords as you claim." Oh, victory was his, and yet, for some reason, the blind kid was grinning as well. He was mystified by that grin. "It wasn't a draw," he said, putting the stalk down. "I rolled one." This really angered the Uchiha. It was clear to him that it was a tie. "You're just mad because it's a tie, and you're not as good as you say you are. If you're so convinced you won, then why don't we up the stakes? I've heard that you came here with a girl. If you lose to me, then not only will you be forced to do as I say for the rest of the week, but she will be forced to take up that punishment as well." Naruto heaved a disappointed sigh. "There is no convincing you of what's obvious, is there? Very well then, I'll show you why I won this. I guarantee you that what I will show you will make you want to beat yourself silly over it. And since we're upping the ante now, then how about this? If I win, then not only do you have to treat me to ramen for the next week, but you have to actually take one of your fangirls out on a date for a weekend. It has to be the same fangirl." Sasuke was actually worried when his opponent reached out his normal arm again. Unlike him, there was no false confidence in the blind boy's voice as he spoke. He spoke as if he were going to win. Bah, Hess a talentless and clanless loser. What could he do with hard work alone? With that on mind, he shook the dope's hand and took to his original position. He gave out another battle cry and charged in. Like before, Naruto struck him from under the armpit. Only this time he noted his opponent apparently dancing around him before he felt it on the back of his head. As he started blacking out, Sasuke then understood why he would have lost. If they were using real blades, Naruto only let him score a hit to give him a false sense of security at the last moment so that he could finish off the movement. And so even if that strike to the head didn't hack him into two pieces, the very first cut under the armpit would have guaranteed that at least his subclavian artery would have been cut so that he would bleed to death slowly. His last emotion at his defeat was of happiness. The crowd could not believe it. The demon brat had beaten their beloved Uchiha to death. They watched as after he slammed that bamboo stick on the back of Sasuke's head before swinging that deadly cudgel in his hand around as if performing Chiburi and Noto. It wasn't until after the hands met in Noto that Sasuke fell to the ground. Tsukiko, on the other hand, was very nervous. Was her brother dead? Relax. "I only knocked him out," said Naruto, his voice irritated as if sensing their intent to kill him. "Just splash some water on his face, and held me up, and running like Hess won a million Ryo." Everyone turned to him, and then watched as a ninja walked on over and checked the unconscious boy's pulse. The kid's right, Sasuke's still alive, unconscious, but alive nonetheless. As the crowd turned to attack the demon brat for defeating their precious Uchiha, they noted him walking away hand in hand with a little girl with a bun on the back of her head. Oh, now they had another bit of ammunition to use against him. They need only plan their attack just right, and then that girl leading the demon brat away would be used as a breeding factory, making Uchiha babies for the glory of Konoha. As Tsukiko watched the two of them walk away hand in hand, she could not help but glare daggers at the young girl. With the amount of resentment she was feeling at the moment, she was picturing herself as being the one to lead Naruto away into the sunset like that, and they were leaving that bun-haired bimbo in the road, beaten, bloodied and scarred. She was also picturing a scene where she would be leading Naruto by the hand and into the Uchiha district, doing unspeakable things to him in her room, unspeakably pleasant things to him, but she'll have to wait for that moment. Until then, she had a perverted nosebleed and an unconscious sibling to take care of. This is it for episode 1. Thanks for watching.